One being at 5 minutes, two being at 6 minutes when you read it now.
Mr. Speaker, the proposition firmly believes that ideas are the property of all society and they shouldn't be monopolised by individuals or firms, and that individuals and firms shouldn't have the ability to charge monopoly rents and extract a profit from society for ideas that they have grown out of resources that society has provided. And so we're going to do three things for you today. First, I'm going to look at the principle that we firmly believe on in this side of the house, that ideas shouldn't be owned by firms or individuals, and that they're different from property and they shouldn't be treated as a property right. Secondly, I'm going to show you the harms of treating ideas as property, and we've got two: that it reduces competition and raises prices, and also it halts derivative works, and so it slows down further development of ideas or creative products. And then finally, I'm going to show you how innovation is going to continue and even be enhanced under our model. And so that's the three things I'm going to do for you today. So first of all, onto the principle of the fact that ideas can't be owned. And the first thing we say on this side of the house is that there's a very real distinction between the ownership of property and between what's called intellectual property or copyright or trademarks. And what we say is that copyright and trademarks are inherently an artificial construct, and we say that this is proven in two ways. Firstly, the fact that they're a relatively recent innovation, the idea of private property has been around for thousands of years, where the intellectual property has only sort of come into being in the last 2 centuries. But also we say the idea that there's intellectual property is normally of a limited time frame, so patents or trademarks run out. We say that that distinguishes it from private property and shows that it's an artificial construct whose purpose is mainly to benefit society, and we say that when those benefits don't accrue, then the artificial idea of intellectual property also needs to fall by the wayside. But we say fundamentally it goes to a deeper level than this, because what intellectual property is essentially the ownership of ideas. And what we say is that ideas don't sort of burst out of thin air. We say that ideas exist because of resources that societies produce, and we say that ideas build on other ideas. They don't exist in isolation. And so we say that it's wrong for a firm to sort of take many developments that have happened over months or years and then sort of add a little bit to them and then claim ownership over the whole idea. We say that's immoral, and that when society's contributed most of what goes into an innovation, we say that it's wrong for the firm to be able to extract monopoly rents from society for that innovation. So that's the principle we're proud to stand for on this side of the house. So what are the harms? We've got two. The first one we say is that there's less competition, and this is sort of inherently true. We say that when a firm has a monopoly over a certain idea or an innovation, they always charge higher prices for that idea. They have a state-enforced monopoly. They're the only one that can take advantage of that idea, and so they charge much higher prices for that idea. And we say there are lots of examples of this being sort of egregiously misused. For example, common drugs, pharmaceutical companies take commonly used drugs, go away, alter them slightly, and then come back and, with FDA approval and charge huge markups on those drugs. We say that this reduction in competition and using intellectual property to stifle competition is bad, and society pays more, and that's really bad. And the fact that people can't afford drugs that could save their lives, we say that that's an immediate harm. And so if on this side of the house we can prove that innovation is going to continue without intellectual property, then that harm has to stand, and so that we're a long way to winning the debate. And we also say that intellectual property stops derivative works, and we say that when someone comes up with an idea, say music or a book or a film, we say that that's great, but often that presents an opportunity for new works or new creative ideas to build off that, to sort of sample off that or incorporate some of the ideas and produce something new and better. And we say that intellectual property actually creates the ability of the creators of an original work to stop other people using their ideas that they've developed and built from previous ideas to continue on the path to creating new creative works or coming up with new ideas or new developments or new technology. And we say that's another bad thing, because essentially that's halting development and halting innovation when in fact it could continue unabated, and so that's another harm. So we say the two major harms are higher prices and limited access to innovations for all society, and secondly we say that it halts innovation because it slows down the development of derivative works. So this brings me to quite a major question. What happens to innovation when you get rid of intellectual property? Because the most common the most common objection you hear is that people need a monopoly so they can extract the monopoly rent to incentivise them to innovate. And we say that there are 3 reasons why innovation will continue or even be enhanced under our model. Firstly, we say that there's this idea of intellectual curiosity, of pure science, or the love of the arts. So we see lots of people producing innovation not motivated by money. So we see researchers, at universities who are incentivized because they want to, they are curious, they want to find out things, not just that they want to make a lot of money. We see, musicians or artists painting, producing works because they want to express their creativity, not motivated by money. So we say a lot of innovation isn't motivated by money and won't be effective. The second thing we say is that there's a first mover advantage. So even without intellectual property, by developing, if you're the first one to have an idea, we say that that gives you an immediate advantage, so you can still profit from that idea. And it also gives you sort of like a marketing tool. So for example, Volvo was the first person to develop the airbag, and we say that even though every other car company now makes airbags, the fact that Volvo was the first company to develop that's given them a reputation for safety, which they can still leverage to this day. That's an incentive. Finally, we see the idea of patronage, where rich people can donate money to help continue innovation development. And we've seen this more and more in the news industry, where rich patrons have donated money to encourage journalism that's not for profit. And so we say innovation will continue and we can avoid all these harms. And for these reasons, we're proud to propose.
Thanks, Nat. I'd like to now welcome the first speaker from the NEDA team, Tom.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, recently on a trip to London I went down to Camden Markets, which for those of you who don't know are a huge market area of South London. In this place I could find for less than £1 everything from a Gucci bag to Ray-Ban sunglasses to any form of record that I wanted. The fact of the matter is that all of these goods were pirated. They were goods which were ripping off the legitimacy of other artists and other things which were legitimate. And the problem with this is that if every single person could somehow go down and buy a Gucci bag for $1, then Gucci would go out of business. If every single person could go and download Ray-Ban, download any form of movie that they wanted, any form of artist that they wanted, record companies would go bankrupt. Not the bankruptcy they talk about that they're going at the moment, but actual bankruptcy. As in, if there was no real means, no legal enforcement, and no moral authority for you to actually buy goods rather than just stealing or ripping them off, then why would you do so? So the affirmative team proposed this idea that apparently people will continue to innovate because they love to produce music, even though they're obviously starving because they can't put food on the plate. And somehow this rich sugar daddy of intellectual property will come forward and give lots of money to universities and bands and movie makers to make movies because he just enjoys doing that. So these are incredible fallacies which over the course of this debate I hope you disprove. My 2 substantive points are that I'm going to talk about our innovation, and I'm going to try and work with this idea that ideas are built on ideas, but that ideas are sacred and should be respected. So the first speaker of the affirmative team got up and talked about this idea that ideas apparently should be the property of everyone. Well, there are some major issues with that, because to begin with, he never actually provided any evidence on how, or analysis on how innovation built on other ideas will actually lead to more ideas being developed, and how people will actually continue to innovate even though there's no financial means for them to do so. Like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, we do live in a capitalist society where you still do have to put bacon on the table at the end of the day. And the problem with this is that it actually means that you can't just have someone that sits in a lab all day, the state paying for their work, and they can produce all these intellectual curiosities and intellectual wonders. So at the end of the day, that person still has to justify their existence to their board of directors, their shareholders, and at the end of the day, has to put money on the table. The problem that we have is that over 60, things like cancer research, for example, over $60 billion a year is spent on researching different forms of cancer cures, and most of that money comes from the private sector, who are well aware that every dollar which they put into research could potentially lead to many dollars out when they manage to commercialize a cancer drug. Imagine how much Pfizer could make if they spend $5 billion on a cure for cancer. They could make hundreds of billions of dollars over the course of that life cycle of the drug. But the problem the affirmative team failed to understand at all is that we already placed reasonable restrictions on intellectual property, because we acknowledge that under some circumstances it is good for ideas to go into the public domain. For example, in drug patents, after 5 years, a company is like no longer able to hold a monopoly on that drug. But they are, during that 5 years, able to recoup a 100% profit on that drug. The problem that the affirmative team failed to understand is that under their model, the drug wouldn't have been developed in the first place, because no company would be stupid enough to put billions of dollars in research and development forward if they didn't think that they were actually going to make a return. So innovation would effectively stop. Contrary to the assertions in the first bit, which are actually lacking of any examples or any real analysis. The second point he talked about is that ideas aren't like property and shouldn't be, respected under the sense of like property rights. Well, the problem that we have at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, is like my iPhone right now is full of ideas, it's full of concepts, it's full of drawings, it's full of like things that I've noted down. Does that mean that like every idea which I have, I should somehow like give to the public domain? Well, no, of course not. The problem with like saying that ideas are not property is that it is the difference between saying that ideas can't lead to money and money can't buy me life, like money can't buy me property. So the fact of the matter is that if you can't protect your ideas, you can't make money and you can't actually invest in whatever you want to. The third one he talked about is like this detriment of idea innovation. Now, in New Zealand we're actually really lucky in that we have like a flexible patent and trademarking system, which actually means that people are free to innovate. And while we'll like admit that things like the mouse, which might have been invented by like IBM 20 years ago, is pretty much like a public domain invention today. That doesn't necessarily mean that when I click on a website or a software program using that mouse, that by assertion, because the mouse is public domain, that software should in effect be public domain, because otherwise why would anyone actually develop it? Like, companies would go bankrupt under the affirmative model, because there'd be simply like no onus to buy anything if you didn't actually necessarily have to. And the fourth point that he talked about is that innovation will be increased. Well, I hope that I can prove that it wouldn't be. So moving on to my two substantive points about like research and development and how like innovation does come from money at the end of the day. Well, every year billions of dollars are put into research and development. Like we see that even at Otago University, which recently monetized like a new form of gel made by the biochemistry department that's able to like make white blood cells and able to like increase like the efficiency of like skin rejuvenation. So the fact of the matter is that the university over like 10 years invested $10 million into research and development programs for this gel. And then they went and sold it to a US drug company for $50 million and made a profit of $40 million. Now, that's an awesome thing, because it means that the university now has $40 million to spend on more research, or to like spend on students. And that's a great thing at the end of the day, because what it means is that if the university is able to use the intellectual talents of its students and staff to make money, to do research and development, and then to sell the ideas to foreign companies, or like New Zealand companies, or even like as we see with the Centre of Innovation, which is the university's kind of like idea offshoot business. Whenever an idea is made up and it's like worth doing, they offshoot it into a company and the university makes money. That's a great thing for everyone involved. The fact of the matter with ideas is that ideas are property, ideas are like a way to make money. And because of that, just like the way that you can't steal my car, you shouldn't be able to steal my ideas. Because like by like proximity, if you're stealing all my ideas, there's no means for me to be able to afford that car, and then we're all screwed. Thank you.
Are you ready to follow?
Gavey stood up and told you 3 things. The first one was you cannot own an idea. No response at all. The second one was the harms of a lack of competition. Again, no response. And then thirdly, we gave you 3 ways why innovation would still happen, yet we just had like an entire speech which was tried to be packaged in 4 points, but it was just 1 point as the fact why innovation won't happen. So I'm going to do 3 things in my speech. I'm going to go over and show you why they haven't addressed our principle, and I'm going to show you why our principle is important to this debate. Secondly, I'm going to go over the harms of a lack of competition, and then thirdly, I'm going to explain to you why we think innovation is going to be really good without intellectual property. The reason our principle of you cannot own an idea is really important in debate is because it knocks out their entire case, which says that you should be able to claim money. Because if we can prove that you do not have a personal claim over that idea, then you have no legitimate basis to say you should have money. So why is it that you do not own an idea? The reality is, and unless you're a libertarian and you're silly, you live in a world where, people are interconnected and there are lots of ideas, right? Like you'll notice that I don't know, in your university class, like anything you learn is built on a like thinker from like 100 years ago or something, alright? You'll notice that any drug developed is based on tests on previous drugs, or anything that is created in the music industry tends to be based on other songs. Like there's actually this thing on YouTube where you can watch a pop song and you can slot in 10 different songs because everything is so closely related. The point is then, if that's the case, it's unfair to claim that it's your individual thing. It doesn't come from you yourself, it comes from everyone. And we say, therefore, you have no basis to say, I own that, right? Because everyone owns it, because ideas are something which are shared. They didn't respond to that, and so they have to deal with that if they want to win this debate. The second thing I'm going to go on to is the harms of a lack of competition. And I'll start with a little bit of a story. Microsoft, did you know, have their viruses and the programs which get rid of their next viruses already stored up for the next 20 years, right? So what that means is that there is no ability for other computer firms or like many more firms to enter the market and say, hey, I'm going to come up with something better, because Microsoft already have all the inventions sussed for the next 20 years, right? That's really bad, right? That lack of competition is just one bad for consumers, particularly poor people in the long run, as there's less competition means less prices and less access to these goods like the internet and drugs. But to also mean the product development is slower, right? Like there's still a demand for things like drugs and like and computers and stuff. And so what that means is that under our system, where you have a lot more people competing to get into that particular market, then you're likely to see better innovations. Why? Because now no longer can they just sit there and rely on their intellectual patent, which will expire. They have to actually compete and make a better product. They conceded this when they're like, oh, we already like can regulate and stuff and make them, force them to give up the patent. But we say that concedes the point that actually when you compete with other firms, that you actually need to think. The other point I'll make on this point of lack of competition is that the thing is, under intellectual property right, you're always going to be charging necessarily higher prices, and we actually think that distorts the market to some extent. Because if you take, for example, drug companies, you'll notice that the drugs that get developed at the moment aren't for the ones like for poor people in Africa. It's for like rich West white consumers with like Viagra and like hair treatment and stuff. And so we say, what you're saying, you actually distort the way firms operate, because you're naturally like you're naturally making them make products which only target a sort of white niche market that rich Western consumers can afford. So we say, if you actually cared about poor people being able to afford things, and you cared about access for everyone, you would address this point. Let's move on to innovation, their entire case. Like, his example was ridiculous, right? Like, people still go and buy Gucci bags. Like, I don't know what that is, but I think my mum has one or something. and so, like, the thing is, and why is that? It's because of what Gavey told you about reputational and first mover advantage. When a company has a genuine product, right, consumers are able to react to that and say, I want the real product. We think it's really good that pirated ones exist, because, cool, that means people who can't afford a Gucci bag can also buy something and get, like, utility from that. But, like, let's take the example of, like, Coke or whatever. You can go down to the supermarket and there's all these, like, cheap Asian alternatives at the store by that sushi shop. But the thing is, right, like, people still buy Coke because it has, like, the first mover advantage. And the other thing about first mover advantage is that you can't, like, copy the product, like, really quickly, right? Like, firms still take time to actually have to investigate what the product looks like. So the firm that gets in there first still has the ability to recoup the initial market which it gets. The other thing they didn't respond to is that we said that intellectual development isn't necessarily profit motivated, right? So a lot of the universities who want to make drugs to help out people in the third world are doing that because they have a concern about the welfare and the livelihoods of people in the third world, not because they want to make money. And we say that exists particularly in the music world, where we know a lot of people create music just because music itself. There's a disjunct between, like, what profit is and what people necessarily want, right? That's why sometimes we require, you know, interventions, right? So we say sometimes that, you know, there are things that society really needs, but it doesn't provide a profit, and we say that's still able to be produced in the minute. The third thing they didn't respond to was altruism. Rich white people or don't enrich any people actually can give money for development. So we propose.
Or now that the welcome final representative speaker in the back, we could.
What's important to you? Yeah. And then the market gets secondary banks won't even exist. Because like the primary market would have
Paul loves to get up here and talk about what we didn't address, but the most important part of our speech is that the firm that invests in research and development is the only firm that bears the cost under their model. But under their model, all firms get the benefits by all of them being able to sell the product, where only one of them has to bear the cost of researching and developing it. That's the key reason why innovation is going to just deteriorate under their proposal. So firstly, I'm going to talk about this principle of property and why the EFA is stuck in the dark ages. And secondly, we're going to be talking about incentives and innovation. And thirdly, so this like minor point about consequences, harms, and competition, which is just premised on the second point anyway. So firstly on the principle of property, basically like EFA set up this false dichotomy, right? They say, oh, there's physical resources and there's these like magical things called ideas, and they're both different. But the thing is that like in a modern economy, productive wealth just doesn't come from like factories and, you know, land rights. There's a whole bunch of things. You need ideas and education and, you know, how to use, like, you know, knowledge of how to do things, right? Like, you know, these days the productive wealth of the economy, like, is a whole, like, fusion of, like, physical and non-physical assets. Now, there's actually no distinction there at all. Because the point is, if I steal your car off you, I then get the benefits of the car and you cease to get the benefits of the car. If I, like, start using your idea for some patent, I get the profits of that, and that comes at the expense of you not being able to get the profits of that. So because you've gone to the effort to develop a new idea, I can then like steal that off you and get the benefits of that when that at the expense of you. And the next part of the fact is like, oh, it's all derived off previous ideas anyway. Like that's just a yarn. The fact is you can own office space inside a building which doesn't belong to you. But like that doesn't like deteriorate the fact that like that office space, you know, still, you know, belongs to you. Even if you don't own the land, right? It's still a derivative of like, you know, someone else's asset. Like, you know, so it's, you know, just because you own like that final stage of it doesn't like undermine the fact that you went to the effort to get that in the first place. So we say that principle of being property, we say ideas are property and that people have every right to use them in that regard. Secondly, which is the main point, is incentives. The major point of the debate is, will innovation actually accrue? Now, in the first speech, we only had 3 points. We had, not-for-profit organisations and donations are going to like compete. Well, maybe Gavey needs to look at like the total amount of donations to corporations every year, and then like the value of like maybe the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Like it's trillions of dollars versus like maybe a few, you know, small number of rich people who are like giving some money to like, you know, corporations. That probably doesn't even happen, right? The fact is that like donations are nothing compared to the massive amount of research and development that goes into the world economy every year, so that's not going to be anything. And for the secondly of the reputation benefits, the thing is you look at Volvo, the fact is that all companies which now have airbags all get the benefits of like reputation, of safety and security. No one cares about who was the first one to develop. If every car company has an airbag in it, they all get the benefits of those reputation. So what do we tell you? We said the fact is is that research and development takes massive costs. Companies go almost bankrupt to make sure that they can take huge risks to try and develop a new drug or a new product. It's not even guaranteed that your product is going to work. Like a lot of the time, there's like massive stages of drug trials, and you don't even know whether it's actually going to be a workable thing at the end. There's massive costs involved, and when at the end of that stage, you're like, and another company just like copies it and uses it, you're at a massive advantage because you've had all that sunk cost of all that extra debt that you've accumulated, where the other company doesn't have that at all. So they're actually at an advantage at you and can profit off those products completely at your expense. Then there's no incentive to innovate, because if you do innovate, you know that the profit's going to be shared between all firms, and you're going to be at a disadvantage because of the huge debt that you have. Well, then Paul got up and said, oh, no, all firms will be competing, and because no one firm will have a patent. Well, that was basically like a repackaged repeat of like what Gavey said, because the fact is that that's a bad thing. At the end of the day, it's the exact same thing, because like all those firms may be competing, but no firm is going to want to take the extra step to develop something new, because they know all those competing firms are going to be able to sell the exact same product and not be able to bear the cost. That means innovation won't happen because firms will know that it's no longer profitable. And the only way it can be profitable is if we allow companies to profit over the ideas that they produce. And first mover advantage is silly, because years and years and years of drug trials and stuff, like at the end of the day, all a drug company has to do is find out what chemical mixture goes into it, and then they can produce it. But they don't have to go through all the endless trials and stuff, so it's still not going to be comparable anyway. And finally, on the consequences, quickly, oh no, monopoly prices are going to happen. Firstly, is that product wouldn't have been there anyway due to previous innovation. So if there's like a monopoly of a new drug, or that drug not being there at all, I think we'll go with the monopoly things. Secondly, is that there's still competition from other products anyway, so it's not like there's not going to be any competition at all. And even if that competition wasn't there, like monopolies still face demand curves, right? The higher the prices are, the less they sell. So they've still got to factor in pricing decisions and can't charge anything they want. And finally, is the fact is like, as Ab said, patents are still temporary anyway, so like long term there's still incentive for the company to continue to develop their own products themselves. So for those reasons, patents are there to stay, intellectual property is to stay there.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Tom and the leaders by Otago.
Ladies and gentlemen, last year Google quit the Chinese market over basically fears that all of their ideas were being stolen. Over 2 months, almost all of the source code that powers the Google search engine was systematically stolen by the Chinese government and given to local Chinese tech firms. Because the problem is that the Chinese know that they can make shit. They know that they can make it better than anyone else in the entire world. What they don't know is how to innovate. They don't know how to invent, and they don't know how to actually solve the real world's problems. So they've actually resorted to stealing it. The problem with this, and the problem that the affirmative team is totally ignore, is that without innovation, the world just stays stagnant. Without innovation, the world just moves forward. And their assertions that some person is going to come and fund all of the research and development on this planet is just an economic fallacy, and I'm going to do my best to prove how this is wrong. The first point I'm going to talk about is this ideas are intrinsically property. When you come up with an idea, you can choose to write it down on a piece of paper and keep it in your safe, and that way the idea is still safe in your safe. Or you can choose to make that product, monetize it, deliver it to market, and make the world a better place. When the first person invented a computer, they could have decided to keep it with them and not give it to anyone else. But they decided to make the world a better place by giving to people. Of course they made money, of course they sold it as a product, but the world actually got tangibly better because people were able to innovate more and more and more based upon that invention, while everyone sort of won. People got computers, and the person who invented computers got money. So the cycle, because it keeps money going around, innovation just keeps happening. The problem is say I'm a researcher and I tomorrow invent the cure for AIDS, right? I go down to Westpac and I ask for a $2 million loan so I can buy like chemical equipment and laboratory space to develop my vaccine because I'm like brilliant, right? The problem is that like I bring my drug to market and the next day some Chinese company buys like a dose of my drug for $1,000, takes it back to China, reverse engineers it, and sells it for $100 and totally undercuts my profit. I've still got this $2 million debt, which I can't pay back now. So like, sweet. So now I invented like a cure for tuberculosis. I do the same thing. But then the Chinese company does it again. Then I invent a cure for cancer, and the Chinese company does it again. And what happens? I stop innovating. I don't actually solve any of the world's problems, because it means that every time that I come up with an idea, every time that I bring it to market, I just get screwed. This is the problem. This is the problem that like the affirmative team failed to understand, is that innovation will stop. Innovation will cease to happen in our economy because there's no like tangible benefit of innovating. We'll just stay with what's like tried and true and stay with what works, and like society will just not move forward at all. So the assertions that the affirmative team have made that innovation will still happening are just an economic fallacy, and the fact that you can even see this, but that they can't even like name one single example of when it's actually worked, like when like open source like idea development has actually worked in a free market system.
Music.
No, music doesn't work. I'm sorry.
Or
So because of these reasons, because ideas are intrinsic to property, because we do need innovation in our future society, and because innovation takes money, because innovation takes research and development, and because all of these steps should be protected, we are very proud to applaud this.
thank you, Gavey.
Mr. Speaker, 3 questions in today's debate. Firstly, can you own an idea? And we say on the side of the House, no, you can't. An idea is a product of all of society. And all we heard from the negative side of the House was, you make money off ideas, therefore you can own it. And Kurt was like, you make money off lots of things, like ideas and education and lots of things. And we think education and ideas are a great analogy where Western society widely accepts that they should be generally provided by the state, accessible to all, because it's an intangible thing that's crucial to the wealth and well-being of our society. Thanks for that awesome analogy, Kurt. And that's why the principle falls to our side of the House. Secondly, will innovation occur? And so we had 3 really solid reasons. The first one we said was that people will do it out of something other than a profit motive. And all Kurt had to say was, well, look, there's not enough money. And he conceded that yes, some innovation would happen. And secondly, we say, well, the fact that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have both, donated the bulk of their wealth to innovating for the third world shows there are resources available. The fact that universities pursue cures for drugs for third world diseases where there isn't a monetary market shows it will happen. The fact that musicians produce music and release it for free shows innovation will happen. We say the rich patrons will support innovation, but thirdly we say there is a first mover advantage and there is a reputational advantage. We gave you examples of this, like Volvo, and Kurt's like, well, all firms get their reputational benefit, which is like empirically untrue. Everyone knows Volvo equals safety. That's like their marketing thing. And he tried to just sort of assert how a very good example wasn't true. Sorry, you're going to have to do better than that. Innovation is definitely still going to occur. And then our harms, which they didn't really even attempt to deal with. You can't deny that under their model, everything costs more. We say that's a bad thing. We think it's a good thing when poor people can afford important drugs, when people can consume more music and more television. Secondly, we say it slows down innovation, and they virtually conceded this as well. Tom, that's your name, yeah, Tom did in his summary, he was like, we have to keep inventing more and more things. We say that's exactly what we want, to force firms to continue to innovate rather than resting on their patent and milking monopoly profits off. But then thirdly, what was the Paul's extension that was left completely untouched was this idea of a misallocation of resources, the idea that under the status quo, firms develop purely for who can pay the most for their innovation. We say that's not a good, because the people with the most money usually, in fact almost always, aren't the ones with the greatest needs. We say that it's best to people innovate to help those with the greatest needs, whether it's people in Africa dying of malaria or poor communities in Western countries. We say that's more important than what drug companies are currently spending billions of dollars on, which is a female arousal drug. We say as important as female orgasm is, we say that there are more important problems in the world, and that's where we want to see resources allocated to. So, Mr. Speaker, we say that our principle stands, that innovation will occur and there are real harms that are caused by intellectual property, and so the motion must stand.
Thank you, Mike. Teams to leave the room, cross the floor, shake hands, and
Congrats.
good work.